Time for today's High Beam Talk with the Doc. And it's being brought to you by Mako's Pharmacy at 240 East 3rd Street in downtown Yorksville. Mako's is your local pharmacy with a caring and knowledgeable staff focused on your health and wellness. And of course, we welcome Dr. Tim McKnight this morning. Hello there. Today, we're going to talk about something that's topical now and easy to get, inflammation. But is it all bad?
Well, no, actually, it's a great question. It's actually acute inflammation is how we heal. So if you sprain an ankle, you tear some ligaments or some tendons, you get this acute inflammatory process, and the swelling is a result of enhanced blood flow to the injury. And it's not just blood flow, but it's the white blood cells that are going there to clean up the debris and help it heal. So that's why you have swelling. But of course, chronic swelling is not good, so we don't want to have prolonged swelling. But the acute inflammatory process is designed to help us heal from either a traumatic injury or a bacterial infection. That's what that blood flow is all about. But it's the chronic inflammation that causes us problems and pain. And I mentioned I brought a visual aid in today, which is my back. Last night I was shoveling the snow exactly how Dr. Jakubowski told us not to, with the bend and twist, with the left lower side of my back already has a little bit of arthritis in it. And I woke up this morning, it was pretty sore, and I was thinking about that inflammatory process. It's inflammatory processes in the joints cause arthritis, and we've talked about that with Dr. J. But we also have inflammatory processes in the lungs. That would be asthma, that'd be emphysema, that'd be allergic rhinitis, that inflammation that makes your nose stuffy, that swelling, and there's something in there that's chronically causing it to be inflamed, usually some type of an allergen. We have inflammation in our arteries, and that leads to hardening of the arteries, because what happens in that inflammatory process is we injure the lining of the blood vessels in the arteries, either by smoking or by high blood pressure or by the foods that we eat. And then cholesterol deposits start to work their way into the walls of the arteries, and then the body says, that doesn't belong there, and you get this inflammatory process where the white blood cells will then go into the wall of the artery to try to gobble up that cholesterol, and in the process, those we call them macrophages, they get engorged with cholesterol, and they become these fluffy, clotting kind of foam cells that cause that plaque buildup. And if that process continues over and over again, like it does in the joints, you get calcification, and Dr. Jakubowski talked about calcium buildup in the joints make the joints stiff so they don't move. Well, the same thing happens in the arteries. It does make the arteries stiffer, but that calcification is what leads to hardening of the arteries. So that's an inflammatory process in the arteries, and we can measure that with a blood test called a C-reactive protein. And when that's high, that's an indicator that you have arterial inflammation. So there's another example of another tissue type.
Hardening of the arteries, which would lead to what?
It can lead to, it leads to heart disease because of the plaque buildup. It can also lead to aneurysms, which is the ballooning. You wouldn't think that would make sense if you're making the arteries harder, but you see more of that ballooning and enlarging of the arteries that can rupture when you have atherosclerotic plaque and hardening of the arteries. And in the Fit for Life class, we show people these arteries. Like, here's a healthy, smooth artery. Here's one with atherosclerosis. Put some gloves on and feel it. It's hard. I mean, it looks like if you see it in a live artery, when that plaque is fresh, it looks like Crisco, but 20 years, 30 years of that plaque now feels like real gritty and like there's sand in the Crisco. So that's hardening the arteries there. We have inflammatory processes in the gut. So inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and diverticulosis is an inflammatory process. So all of these are examples of inflammation, and again, chronic inflammation is what we're trying to avoid. And we can do repetitive things to our joints to cause arthritis, but most of the other tissue types develop chronic inflammation because of chemical insults. So if you smoke, that insults the respiratory tract. If you drink alcohol, the alcohol is really hard on the liver, and the liver can become cirrhotic or inflamed. So there's another tissue type that's involved. And in the arteries, it happens to be a lot of the foods we eat. And so when you look at the inflammatory process, it really comes down to two terms, oxidation and antioxidation. Oxidation is a rusting process, is what makes a nail rust that's been sitting out in the wet weather. That rusting, that's oxidation. Antioxidation is like polishing that off, cleaning it off. Oxidation is all about stealing electrons, which is stealing is bad. And antioxidation is about giving electrons back, which is healthy. And so when we talk about antioxidants, that helps to reverse that inflammatory oxidative process. So antioxidants like turmeric and vitamin C and vitamin D and fish oil, those are really good examples. But I always tell people, remember, those are supplements. Let's start with the foods, which are what nature has provided. The fish, green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds and beans and berries, those are really rich in antioxidants that help to slow that inflammatory process, slow the aging process, and help the body restore itself. But if you're eating salad and then you're having a fast food meal in the evening, well, you've kind of negated that, right? Because the Western diet that's high in fats and high in sugars is very, very inflammatory. And I tell my Fit for Life class, if you want to be reminded of where those arthritic joints are, make a dozen cookies and eat them in one sitting. And you will soon, within 24 hours, you'll feel those achy joints because that inflammation goes right to that spot and it can cause you to hurt. So, yes, acute inflammation is good. Chronic inflammation is what we're trying to avoid.
So you have the acute inflammation in the back. Is there a good way to try to rid yourself of that without visiting the doctor?
Well, yeah, the easiest thing for me is ibuprofen. I'll take 2 or 3 ibuprofen. I just happen to have a little bit of steroid today from a previous injury, and that's what I took. And I'll feel really good with 4 milligrams of methylprednisolone. It's a prescription, but I had some left over. But often I'll take ibuprofen. And then time. Later today, I'll have a massage on that part of the back, and I'll see Dr. Jakubowski, and he might torture me a little bit with his treatments. But all those things are things that are positive. But the last thing I want to do today is eat a lot of junk food,
right?
Because that's going to inflame it even more. So again, when I was shoveling the walk or the driveway last night, I was thinking, let me get this job done as quick as I could, and I was that 18-year-old and it was heavy snow, and I wasn't thinking about it. And then it's like, gosh, I'm 60 years old. I need a snowblower. And it's not that I can't do it, but why would I want to continue to inflame my back?
But you're like everybody else. Your head's still 25. Your body's 60.
That's the problem. And I've been doing that enough years that I'm paying the price for it. And sure, I can do it. I could have gone slower, and I could have got it done. But if there's an easier way that can protect my back, because the next step in that process is a herniated disc. We talked about those circular fibers of the disc, and every time you do something like there's micro tear. I probably had some micro tear on that last night. If I do that all winter long, I may end up blowing the disc, and it's not worth it. And many of us get to that point in our life like, okay, that's not worth it anymore. But we need to be thinking about that when we're 30 and 40 and in our 20s, because sometimes it's too late once that goes and you start that process of injections and back surgeries, and now you can't do things, and now you're discouraged. So we have to be really careful and listen to those signs of chronic inflammation, which is often pain and stiffness, and some of the other ones we can measure with blood tests, like for the arteries. But even your breathing, we've had people in the Fit for Life class, it's been amazing, mild asthmatics or someone with allergies, when they clean up their diet and they get rid of those inflammatory foods, their asthma is gone.
Wow.
They can breathe better through their nose. Their sinuses clear up because there are foods that are causing that mucosal lining inflammation. So it's kind of neat, but it does take some effort. Nobody wants to eat good foods because they don't taste quite the same as the bad stuff.
Just have to get used to that, too.
You do.
Well, tell Dr. J not to laugh too much while he's treating you today, then, all right?
I don't think that ever works with him. We'll have him on next week, maybe, and I'll get even with him then.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here today.
You're welcome.
That's Dr. Tim McKnight. He is always looking out for our health here on Talk with the Doc on the 830 High Beam, brought to you by Mako's Pharmacy, offering their customers and community free assistance with comparing and selecting a plan based on your specific prescription needs. Call Mako's Pharmacy, 740-922-5400.